Yes, so in today's class, we will understand in detail about bulk modulus. So we have already seen that when a body is submerged in a fluid, it undergoes a hydraulic stress, which is equal in magnitude to the hydraulic pressure. So this leads to the decrease in the volume of the body, thus producing a strain which is called as volume strain. And the ratio of hydraulic stress to the corresponding hydraulic strain is called bulk modulus. So, bulk modulus is denoted by the symbol B, and the formula is minus P by delta V by V. So, the negative sign indicates the fact that with an increase in pressure, a decrease in the volume occurs. So if P is positive and delta V is negative, thus for a system in equilibrium, the value of bulk modulus B is always positive. So SI unit of bulk modulus is the same as that of pressure. That is Newton per meter square or Pascal. And let me give you bulk modulus of some common materials. So bulk modulus of aluminium is 72 GPa. And bulk modulus of brass is 61 GPa. For copper it is 140. For glass it is 37. For iron it is 100. For nickel bulk modulus is 260. And for steel bulk modulus is 160. So this is all about solids. Now let us see about liquids. Bulk modulus of water is 2.2. Bulk modulus of ethanol is 0.9. Then carbon disulfide is 1.56. Then for glycerine, it is 4.76. And for mercury, it is 25. And if we talk about gases, that is air at standard temperature pressure, it is 1 into 10 power minus 4. So the reciprocal of the bulk modulus is called compressibility. So what is compressibility? Compressibility is reciprocal of bulk modulus. And compressibility is denoted by K, that is 1 by B. Or that is minus 1 by delta P into delta V by V. So it can be seen from the table which I have given you that for bulk modulus for solids are much larger than for liquids, which are again much larger than gases. So solids are least compressible, whereas gases are most compressible. And gases are about 1,000,000 times more compressible than solids. So gases have high compressibility, which vary with pressure and temperature. And the incompressibility of the solids is primarily due to the tight coupling between the neighboring atoms. And the molecules in liquids are also bound with their neighbors, but not as strong as in solids. So molecules in gases are very poorly coupled to their neighbors. So let us take a numerical based on bulk modulus. So the average depth of Indian Ocean is about 3,000 meters. Calculate the fractional compression delta V by V of water at the bottom of the ocean, given that the bulk modulus of water is 2.2 into 10 power 9 Newton per meter square, and you take G as 10 meters per second square. So what is the pressure exerted? Pressure formula is H rho G. So H is height, H is nothing but depth, that is 3,000 meter, and rho is density. Density is 1,000 kg per meter cube. Then gravity is 10 meters per second square. So that is 3 into 10 power 7 kg per meter per second square. So that is 3 into 10 power 7. We can also write it as Newton per meter square. Now if you want to calculate fractional compression, that is delta V by V, that is stress by B. Stress is 3 into 10 power 7 Newton per meter square by bulk modulus is 2.2 into 10 power 9 Newton per meter square. Newton per meter square get cancelled. If you cancel out these terms, you will get 1.36 into 10 power minus 2, or you can say 1.36%. Now we will see what is Poisson's ratio. So careful observations with the Young's modulus experiment show that there is a slight reduction in the cross section of the wire. So the strain perpendicular to the applied force is called lateral strain. What is the strain which is perpendicular to the applied force? That is lateral strain. Now Simon Poisson, he pointed out that within the elastic limit, lateral strain is directly proportional to the longitudinal strain. And the ratio of lateral strain over longitudinal strain is Poisson's ratio. And if the original diameter of the wire is D and the contraction of the diameter under stress is delta D, then the lateral strain will be delta D by D. And if the original length of the wire is L and elongation under stress is delta L, then longitudinal strain is delta L by L. So how do you get Poisson's ratio? Poisson's ratio is delta D by D by delta L by L. So Poisson's ratio is denoted by this symbol, which is also called as sigma, delta D by delta L into L by D. So Poisson ratio is a ratio of two strains. It is a pure number and it has no dimensions or units, and its value depends only on the nature of the material. For steel, the value is between 0.28 and 0.30. And for aluminium, this is for steel. And for aluminium alloys, it is about 0.33. So after understanding Poisson's ratio, let's move on to elastic potential energy in a stretched wire. So when a wire is put under tensile stress, work is done against the interatomic forces. So this work is stored in the wire in the form of elastic potential energy. Now when a wire of original length L and area of cross section A is subjected to a deforming force F along the length of the wire, and let the length of the wire be elongated to L, small l. This is elongated to small l. Then we know that F is equal to YA into small l by capital L. Here Y is Young's modulus of the material of the wire. Now for a further elongation of infinitesimal small length dl, work done dW is F into dl. Or you can say YAL dl by L. So therefore amount of work done W in increasing the length of the wire from L to L plus 1, that is L is equal to 0 to L is equal to L, is W is equal to integral 0 to L YAL by L dl. So that is YA by 2 into L square by L. So if you integrate it, you get 1 by 2 into Y into small l by capital L whole square into AL. So that is nothing but half into Young's modulus into strain square into volume of wire. So that is half into stress into strain. Young's modulus is nothing but stress. Young's modulus into strain is stress. So stress into strain into volume of wire. So this work is stored in the wire in the form of elastic potential energy that is given by capital U. And therefore the elastic potential energy is U is equal to half into sigma epsilon. This is the expression for elastic potential energy in a stretched wire. Now let us see the applications of elastic behavior of materials. So as you can see, the elastic behavior of materials plays an important role in everyday life. So all engineering designs require precise knowledge of the elastic behavior of materials. For example, while designing a building, the structural design of the columns, beams, and supports require knowledge of strength of materials used. Have you ever thought why the beams used in construction of bridges as supports, etc., have a cross section of the type I? Why does a heap of sand or a hill always have a pyramidal shape? Answers to these questions can be obtained from the study of structural engineering, which is based on concepts developed here. So cranes used for lifting and moving heavy loads from one place to other, they have a thick metal rope to which the load is attached. And the rope is pulled up using pulleys and motors. Suppose we want to make a crane which has a lifting capacity of 10 tons or metric tons. You know, 1 metric ton is 1000 kg. So how thick the steel rope should be? We obviously want that the load does not deform the rope permanently. Therefore, the extension should not exceed the elastic limit. So we know that mild steel has a yield strength of about 300 into 10 power 6 Newton per meter square. So area of cross section is always greater than or equal to work by sigma y. That is mg by sigma y. So that is 10 power 4 kg into 10 meters per second square by 300 into 10 power 6 Newton per meter square. So if you do the cancellation, you will get 3.3 into 10 power minus 4 meter square. So corresponding to a radius of about 1 centimeter for a rope of circular cross section. So generally a large margin of safety, that is of about a factor of 10 in the load, is provided. So thus a thicker rope of radius about 3 centimeter is recommended. And a single wire of this radius would practically be a rigid rod. So the ropes are always made of a number of thin wires braided together like in pigtails for ease in manufacture, flexibility and strength. Now, a bridge has to be designed such that it can withstand the load of the flowing traffic, the force of the winds, and its own weight. Similarly, in the design of buildings, use of beams and columns is very common. So, in both the cases, the overcoming of the problem of bending of beam under a load is of prime importance. So the beam should not bend too much or break. So let us consider the case of a beam loaded at the center and supported near the ends. So let us say we are taking a bar of length L. This is a bar of length L. Okay, and its breadth is B and its depth is D. When loaded at the center, so it forms like this. So delta is equal to WL3 by 4B D cube Y. So this relation can be derived using what you have already learnt and a little calculus. So we see that to reduce the bending for a given load, one should use a material with a large Young's modulus. So for a given material, increasing the depth D rather than the breadth B is more effective in reducing the bending, since delta is proportional to 1 by D cube, or you can say delta is inversely proportional to D cube and only to 1 by B. So the length L of the span should be as small as possible. But on increasing the depth, unless the load is exactly at the right place, that is, which is difficult to arrange in a bridge with moving traffic. So the D bar may bend. So this is called buckling. So the bending of bars is called buckling. So to avoid this, a common compromise is the cross-sectional shape. So that's why the bridges are made in the shape I. Okay. So this section provides a large load-bearing surface and enough depth to prevent bending. So this shape reduces the weight of the beam without sacrificing the strength and hence reducing the cost. Now, use of pillars or columns is also very common in buildings and bridges. So, a pillar with rounded ends supports less load than that with a distributed shape at the end. So, the precise design of a bridge or a building has to take into account the conditions under which it will function. So the cost and long period, reliability of usable materials, etc. So the answer in this question, why the maximum height of a mountain on earth is approximately 10 kilometers, can also be provided by considering the elastic properties of rocks. So a mountain base is not under uniform compression, and this provides some shearing stress to the rocks under which they can flow. So the stress due to all the material on the top should be less than the critical shearing stress at which the rocks flow. So at the bottom of a mountain of height h, the force per unit area due to the weight of the mountain is h rho g, where rho is the density of the material of the mountain and g is the acceleration due to gravity. And the material at the bottom experiences this force in the vertical direction, and the sides of the mountain are free. So therefore, this is not a case of pressure or bulk compression. There is a shear component, approximately h rho g itself. So now the elastic limit for a typical rock is 30 into 10 power 7 Newton per meter square. So equating this to h rho g, we get rho is equal to 3 into 10 cube kg per meter cube. So that gives h rho g is equal to 30 into 10 power 7 Newton per meter square. So H is equal to 30 into 10 power 7 Newton per meter square by 3 into 10 cube kg per meter cube into 10 meter per second square. So that is, if you cancel the numbers, you get 10 kilometer, which is more than the height of Mount Everest.